Welcome to today's webinar, where I'll be providing the proven blueprint to becoming a profitable private money lender. I'm really excited to have you all here. Thank you so much for taking time out to join me today. My name is Beth Pinkley Johnson, and I am the co-author of Lend2Live, How to Earn Hassle-Free Passive Income in Real Estate with Private Money Lending. And I'll start off today's webinar by just providing a little bit of background about who I am. A lot of people ask me when I got started in real estate, and this is about when I got started in real estate. I was lucky to be adopted into a family that really understood the importance of generational wealth. So I spent my childhood a lot of the time at my dad's flips and rental properties. My little sister and I hated being there at the time, but I learned real estate very early on by osmosis and just by being there as my dad was doing it as a side hustle as a woodshop teacher by day. My mom would read Money Magazine, if any of you are old enough to remember that, and always would tell me the learnings that she got out of the magazine about generational wealth and how to make your money work for you. And not only did they espouse that to all of my other 4 brothers and sisters, but they did it for other families as well. So if you're wondering who I am, that's me right there. I'm the youngest of 5. But my family also sponsored another Vietnamese family and helped not just acclimate them into American culture, but also worked with them to invest in real estate, buying and selling properties, buying a commercial building eventually, and having a business out of it. They ran several businesses. So I was really fortunate to be able to belong to a family that really wanted to educate not just us, but others on the importance of passive income and generational wealth. But I realized that not everybody was in the same shoes. So I'm excited to be able to participate and share some of my key learnings along the way with all of you as well. So I was always in real estate. I always thought I'd be doing it as a side hustle. I was flipping houses on the side while I was working a day job. I got married. I got divorced. Life happened. And wouldn't you know, I found at the end of my 30s, I was starting all over again. And then I ended up being introduced to this guy right here. And that's how I got into private money. I mean, I always knew about real estate, but I didn't really know much about private lending at all. It actually started with, some booze and a boat, to be honest with you. And I think that's how most people get into private lending, by chance. It's not something that you just set out to do. It's not as sexy maybe as flipping as what we saw on HGTV. But it was something that really bonded Matt and I on our very first date post-divorce. And after a while, I ended up helping him with his private lending business. And then we became partners. And I learned through him how to lend out my own capital using my self-directed IRA to start. I rolled over some money that I had from a plan when I used to be employed by T-Mobile, and it was just sitting there in some stocks. And so I knew real estate and thought that this was an appropriate avenue for me. Next thing you know, then we're ending up taking our children along as our capital base grew, taking them with us to meet clients, look at project sites, just as my parents did with us, helping to train them in some small way on how to be entrepreneurial and also make sure that we're taking care of our capital and making it grow for us. And then next thing you know, it ends up becoming into a full-blown business. We're not only managing a team now, but we manage capital from dozens and dozens of passive investors. And it's something that we've grown really, really proud of. But it wasn't really what I had planned on from the onset. I think that the private money lending journey, whether you turn it into an active business or not, always starts with just a casual conversation, learning from somebody else who's done it along the way. So private money lending and the real estate investor journey really starts from a number of different avenues. I find that a lot of people want to invest in private money because maybe they have some capital sitting on the sides, and the idea of wholesaling and flipping right out of the gate isn't something that feels comfortable for them. So they choose to lend out their own capital and learn the ropes of active real estate investing through somebody else, but not with all of the consequences associated with it. We have a lot of busy professionals that also lend through us because they just really don't have time in their day with busy families and busy W-2s to really get into active investing. And then there's also retired landlords, or tired landlords as I might be in that category, for those who really just don't want to deal with tenants' trashes and toilets, and or maybe simplifying their estate, liquidating their real estate portfolio, and want to stay in real estate in some form or fashion. So they decide to move over into private lending as a means of building up their capital, but not having to actively manage tenants anymore. There's also flippers that are in between projects, especially in the last couple of years, who choose to lend out their capital in between projects because they don't want to feel forced to have to take on a project with slim margins, but they want to still keep their money working for them. And then there's also the retirement plan investor, those who really want to take their money out of stocks and other public equities and lend that out for a passive source of income in a tax deferral plan. And so really, no matter where you get started, even if you're active investing right now, I think that a lot of active investors really aspire to eventually become private money lenders because of its level of passivity. There's also a ton of other perks about private money lending. It's obviously a lot more stable compared to especially this past week and the volatility of the stock market. It's much more passive and hands-off in terms of its source of income, at much more than being involved in flipping and landlording. And it's also highly liquid. The great thing about private lending is that you get to decide how long you lend your money out for. And so there's a lot of liquidity associated with that you wouldn't get in other types of investments, such as syndications. And as I always espouse, it's really important to secure it with real estate, and that way you have actual tangible collateral to back up your capital investment. And then it's highly flexible as well. I love the fact that you have the ability to really do it on your own terms. Private money lending is somewhat unregulated across the country. And so as long as you're doing it safely and securely and legally, you really have the ability to choose your own lending opportunities on your own terms. And then, of course, it can become a diversity tool as well. Diversification is really important with your investments, and it's great to have investments like private money loans that aren't necessarily correlated to the ups and downs of the stock market. And as we'll discuss a little bit later too, there's some great high returns that are associated with it. This can vary based on your risk preference and your deal preference, but it's not uncommon to be able to get double-digit returns with private money lending as well. So there's about 4 different flavors that I would like to say, 4 different buckets, if you will, about how to lend your private money. The first is going to be do-it-yourself private money loans. This is what I talk about in my book, Lend2Live. But really, when you're talking about overall ways to invest, when you do DIY, it's still passive, but you still have to do all the efforts in finding a loan and manage the aspects of getting it across the funding table too. So when you're looking at different ways to invest private money, the key considerations here are how involved and how much control do I want over the placement of my capital? And then what are the kind of desired returns that I want? And so you can see this is a bit of on an axis where do-it-yourself private loans is somewhat passive, but you have to do some of the work yourself and manage a virtual team for it. But you really can get high returns from it because you get to garner all the points and all the interest income from it. But if you're really afraid about doing it on your own, some people start out working through private lender partnerships. And what I mean by this is being able to use another private money lender in your network or at your local meetup that you meet, and really working through them. Maybe they have all of their capital deployed, but they still have some borrowers who have projects that need to be funded. Private lender partnerships can be a great way for you to be able to lend out your capital and have access to some deal flow, but also learn the ropes as well. The trade-off for that is that you're going to probably give up a little bit of your return on that. So it could be that the partner wants to take some or all of the points that are charged, the lender points, and they may take a portion of your interest income as well. But then it's nice to be able to work with a private lender partner early on if you really feel uncomfortable about doing it yourself, or maybe you have less experience in real estate. The third avenue would be working with a direct lender to privately place your capital. When we started Flynn Family Lending a decade ago, we used to do the same format. So we did what was called whole trust deed private placement. And that means that we had a partner come to us and say they had X amount of capital to lend out. And then I would go and find a loan that fit their lending criteria and their risk tolerance, and then place it directly for them. The nice thing about this is that it is a way to have access to even more deal flow, and you're working with somebody who actually runs this as an active business, as opposed to the private lender partner who may just be doing this passively and you meet at a local real estate meetup. These direct lenders typically are brick and mortar, they have a lot of borrower deal flow, and they have some practices in place that can help make sure that your loan is placed safely and securely. So it's definitely a little bit more passive than the previous two options that we covered. And then last is private debt fund placement. So the nice thing about the private debt fund is that you basically get to be ultra passive in it, and you get more diversification across an entire portfolio of loans. The challenge with this is that your returns are going to be a little bit less because the amount of costs associated with running a private debt fund. But it's much, much more passive and hands-off. You get that diversification, as I mentioned. It's not just placing it on one individual loan or a couple of individual loans. It's really spread out across a number of different loans within that entire debt fund portfolio. The other nice thing about this is that you can also have your money deployed for you more consistently. So you have more consistent income coming in, and it's not something that you have to go out and find another loan to fund once your loan proceeds have come back, and you have to go find another one to place. So these are the 4 different flavors of different ways to invest your private money capital. And let's look at a sample of what that might look like. So for example, you have a $100,000 loan and the borrower wants to place it against a single family property that is worth $150,000. So you're looking at about 67% loan to value, meaning you have about a 23% equity buffer protection in case the market fluctuates, in case the borrower has scheduling delays, or maybe they don't achieve the total after repair value that they estimated. There's still a healthy equity protection covering your capital investment. You agree on an annualized interest rate of 12%, so that's $1,000 a month interest only, and you decide to charge 3 points for an origination fee up front for a loan term of 12 months. So that means the 3 points is something that I typically deduct right out of the total gross loan amount. So if I'm lending out $100,000, then I might be net proceeds to them, giving them $97,000 less any closing costs and legal costs associated with closing that loan. So the total income generated would be $3,000 upfront for your 3-point loan origination fee, and then 12 months of interest-only payments. So for a total of $15,000 in 1 year that you can make on that $100,000 private loan investment. So your total cash-on-cash return, if you were to do it yourself, would be 15%. But if you were to use any one of the brokered options, meaning if you were to place it with a private lender partner, use a direct lender for private placement, or invest in a private debt fund, your returns would be diminished a little bit, somewhere around the 7 to 11%. And that's really going to depend on who you partner with. Every single private placement, direct lender, or private money partner will have different costs associated with doing business with them, and so it's going to vary. But this will just show you a little difference between doing it yourself and the increased returns that you can get versus brokering it out or using a private money partner or a direct lender. So when we first got started, I had all these concerns. I didn't really know who to turn to. As I mentioned, it was just a really casual conversation with my husband and I kind of naively got started with him, thinking it would be a fun way to spend some more time together. I'd earn a little admin fee up front from him, helping support his loans. But I really didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know if I was protecting our capital safely because I didn't know what I didn't know. And so when the opportunity to write the book came up, I really jumped at the chance to be able to help fill in the blanks for a lot of other people who probably experienced the same overwhelm that I had and the lack of resources that were available. So within the book, we describe what's called the CPR lending system. This is really a collection of all the lessons learned that I have experienced over the past decade and really putting it into a system that allows us to really understand the end-to-end private loan life cycle. And I think that this is really important to put in place because in particular, there are steps that you need to do before you even reach out to a borrower. So the CPR lending system is all the C's are every step along the way. And you can see here that there's basically 5 steps. I call calculate and evaluate step 0 because it's not necessarily something that you'll do each and every single time, but it's something that you may revisit from time to time. The P in the CPR lending system is the people, the property and project, and the paperwork involved every step of the way. So we really wanted to make sure that you understood all of the key considerations for why you should be doing a certain step a certain way, what you need to know as a private lender relative to who's involved, and that changes within each step, as well as the paperwork involved, and that changes within each step. So in calculate and evaluate, it's going to be a lot about you individually, thinking through your personal and financial and lifestyle goals. It's you defining what your lending guidelines are and developing some paperwork and some context around that. But when you get into the latter stages, you're going to involve other people, other paperwork. And so we wanted to describe that in detail so that you could see really from beginning to end what that loan funding process looks like. And then the R in the CPR lending system is all the risks and rewards associated with doing a step a certain way. So at the end of each chapter, we discussed a lot of lessons learned. I'll be sharing some of those with you here in terms of key mistakes that new and novice borrower or lenders tend to make. But we really wanted to make sure that you understood that really up front, these first 2 steps are really critical to your success before you even make contact with a borrower. So one of the biggest mistakes that I have seen new and novice and really experienced private lenders make is that the first thing that they end up doing is either trying to find borrowers to lend to or raising capital. Maybe they don't want to just lend through their own capital, but they want to bring in other people. But what they haven't really done is taken the time to sit down and really think through what it is that they need and want, what it is that they have in terms of skills, experience, resources, and then filling in the blanks of what they don't know, what they don't have. This could be anywhere from figuring out that maybe you need to understand the legalities of lending in Nevada versus lending in Virginia. It could be making sure that you find someone to connect with that can help you with appraisals and valuations of properties because you're a little less experienced. This is really, really critical to take time up front before you make contact with the borrower, because whenever you make contact with the borrower, time is of the essence. They're really looking for you to close that loan yesterday. And so we wanted to make sure that when we defined the CPR lending system, that you knew what to do when, so that you were ultra prepared every step of the way and you could proceed forward very quickly, but also in a safe manner. So for the calculate and evaluate, you're really establishing your foundation. The overall objectives here are to make sure, again, as I said, establish clear goals and boundaries for yourself. As I told you my origin story about getting into private lending and real estate, we didn't do that. I just kind of got into it by chance. And if I had to do it all over again, I really would have set some more clear rules and boundaries in place so that I could keep it active or passive instead of being an active business owner. I really love what we do now, and I'm really proud of what my husband and I have created, but I didn't really expect it to become a full-blown business. And so I know that in speaking with lots of private lenders out there, your whole desire is to create a source of passive income, to have some more financial freedom that allows you to have more geographical freedom and more time freedom to do whatever it is that is your true why. So we really want to make sure that you're establishing that and that you're also outlining what your lending box is. And what I mean by lending box is that's describing in detail what your lending guidelines are. This could be what kind of returns you want, how much money you have to lend, what kind of projects and property types feel comfortable for you to lend on. If you're a commercial real estate broker, maybe you want to lend on commercial properties because that's where your experience comes from. But if you're an experienced flipper or a landlord, perhaps you stay focused more on 1 to 4 units. It's really important to put the foundation in place up front about what it is that you want and need before you move forward. And then additionally, it's really important to research who your target market is and where you're going to lend in. This map here shows you the states that are highlighted in any color, those that have some sort of licensing requirement to it. All the rest don't have a requirement, but those, like for example, in my home state of Washington, you need to have a license to do owner-occupied business, commercial, or business or commercial purpose loans. So it's really important to understand the nuances state by state and get attached to a private lender attorney who can help navigate you and provide you some legal advice on how to do it in accordance with that state law. It does vary state by state. The ones that are in red have probably more licensure requirements associated with it, as well as the ones in green, but each one is uniquely different. And the reason I didn't put some specifics out here on what the kind of licensing requirements are is that I really want you to make sure that you're reaching out to an attorney up front and that is well-versed in your particular state that you choose to lend in and can provide guidance to you directly, because I'm not an attorney. But one of the biggest mistakes that I see private lenders making here is that they're not prepared to answer questions when they reach out to borrowers about what they can lend in and what they can do. So you end up becoming a little bit analysis paralysis here because you've already made your outreach, but yet you haven't really taken time by yourself to think about what it is that's going to allow you to sleep well at night. What can you lend on? What can't you lend in? What's going to make you uncomfortable versus what's going to make it a real slam dunk loan to lend on? The next step is connect, and this is really where you build your network. Again, this isn't connecting with borrowers up front, although you may, but it's really the core objective here is to make sure that you're identifying who it is that you need to be a part of your virtual dream team as a private lender. Private lending is very much a team sport. You should not do it on your own. I always say that private lending really requires a ton of perspective. And when you're just starting out, it's really hard to develop intuition when you don't know what you're doing and you're trying to wear all these different hats. So it's really important to make sure that you're putting, first and foremost, a real estate attorney experienced in private lending in your back pocket, someone you can reach out to. But you're also going to need people like title officers, escrow closers, maybe valuation experts, that could be real estate agents, or mortgage brokers or insurance agents that can help you every step of the way. And then you're also going to be working on figuring out where do these borrowers hang out at, meaning in the local market that you're going to be lending in. Are there meetups that you could be attending? Are there social media groups that you could join to become more acquainted with these resources and prospective borrowers as well? And also during the connect phase, we work to develop a compelling elevator pitch as well. You need to make sure that you have a very succinct way to be able to articulate who you are and what kind of property or project that you're trying to attract that you might want to lend on. For example, if you only have, and I put only in quotations because 100,000 is a lot, but if you only had 100,000 to lend out on, maybe you don't lend on a commercial property. Maybe you don't lend on a mobile home park. It's really important to develop a pitch where you can articulate and attract the right borrower and the right project that you want to lend on. So the biggest mistake that I've seen a lot of private lenders make is that when they go to a meetup, they stand up during a needs and wants or during introductions and announce that they're private lenders and that they have money to lend out without any other additional context. And while this is great because a lot of people are probably going to approach you, it can be extremely overwhelming. When you're a private lender, you're definitely the most like popular person in the room at a meetup because you're the one with capital, and every active investor wants more capital. So it can be a little bit uncomfortable if you don't develop an elevator pitch up front to be able to articulate what it is that you want and need. And so I try to encourage new private lenders to be able to develop a compelling elevator pitch, and not only do it in a verbal format so you can practice it and do it before you go to these meetups, but also a way to announce yourself on social media as well, because sometimes people like to put out there that they're private lenders when they're responding to comments, but it's also important to be able to find a way to have a written elevator pitch as well. The next step is contact. And this is where you make your initial borrower engagement. So the total objective here is really to make sure that you're screening loan opportunities, that you're really getting acquainted with each other. I mean, even before you go ahead and hear about their project, you're going to want to gather information about the borrower themselves. What kind of project experience do they have? Why are they in real estate investing? Is it a cultural fit? Do you guys get along just on an informal level? Or do they start talking and it just kind of grates on your nerves right away? This is a chance for you to just get initially acquainted with prospective borrowers so that you can ask them questions about what they're trying to accomplish and see if there's some mutual gain for both of you. So you're trying to make a mutually informed decision on whether or not you want to proceed forward or not with a loan opportunity. And it's also a chance for you to be able to filter out some unsuitable opportunities early on. So if somebody immediately comes up to you and you're talking and they tell you that they have a infill lot and want to go ground up construction on it, but you don't have much capital or experience to lend on a project like that, it's really easy in the contact phase to be able to tell them that that's not necessarily a project that you can fund. So the biggest issue I see with private lenders really in this particular phase is that you're not taking command and control over the conversation. Oftentimes, new private lenders are really kind of lack the confidence to be able to put themselves out there, especially if you haven't developed an elevator pitch. And so it can be really uncomfortable when a borrower who sometimes they're know-it-alls or super experienced just start talking at you. And you can lose control of that conversation very quickly. It's really important in this phase to be able to create a list of open-ended questions, to be able to have the borrower tell their story to you, and to be able to manage that narrative. So it's command and control doesn't mean that you're going to be talking to them all the time, but it means that you're going to have a list of questions on hand that you can ask them to have them tell you in their own words what it is that they're trying to accomplish. In this phase, you're going to ask them about their experience, as I mentioned, but you're also going to ask them about the specific project at hand. You're going to want to get information about what type of project it is, how much will it cost, how long will it take, what is their exit strategy. In this particular phase, you're really doing what I would call a pre-qualification. And there very much is a fine art to doing this because based on what the borrower tells you, you're going to have to provide some very specific follow-on questions. So learning how to critically think about the loan opportunity and actively listen is a real core skill that you need to have in this phase. The next phase is compile and condition, and this is really where you do your deep due diligence on the property, the project, and the person itself. So again, remember that conversation we just had with the borrower. This is your chance now, once you've agreed to terms and you both decide to proceed forward, you like their project, you agree that you're going to charge 3 points and 12%. At this point, you move forward and start collecting the documentation that you need to verify what they told you in your conversation. So here you're going to apply what's commonly referred to as the 5 C's of credit. You might not necessarily be asking for a credit report, but you're going to be making sure that you understand the borrower's character, the collateral, their credit worthiness, their capital position. There are a lot of different things that you're going to be looking for in this phase. And this is the one that probably takes a little bit longer for most private lenders, especially early on. There's a lot of documentation to review and make sure that it meets your standards and your criteria. You're going to be ordering a title commitment from a title officer so that you can make sure that title is clear and so that you can order a title policy later on. But there's a lot of hands-on work here that you can get assistance with, but it's really up to you to make sure that you're verifying what type of information is being told to you. So one of the biggest mistakes that I see here with private money lenders is that they don't verify project information. They're letting the borrower tell them how much they're buying it for, how much they're going to use for rehab, and how much the after repair value is. But the private lender isn't really going and doing their own due diligence behind the scenes. There's a lot of free online tools that can help you validate valuations. There are also paid tools that you can use, such as BPOs, broker price opinions, and full-blown appraisals if you want or need to help you get a better understanding of whether or not the borrower's projections are indeed realistic. Another mistake that I see a lot of borrower or lenders do here is that they really just use trust, a past relationship. I find that private lenders early on tend to lend to somebody they think they know and trust. And personal relationships aren't necessarily indicative of how professional relationships will work out. For example, it's like you could have somebody that is a best friend since third grade and you've known them forever. You were roommates together in college. They're like a sister to you. But do you really know their credit report? You don't know their credit number. You don't know how they do on their performance reviews at work. So there's a lot of information about professionalism, about financeability that you just don't know about people that you have a personal relationship with. So I always caution to make sure that you're really doing your due diligence on the property itself, as much as you do on the borrower as well. Compose and close is where you then take that loan and turn it into actual legal documentation. There's a number of different documents that you will need outside of just a promissory note. And I really highly suggest, as I mentioned early on, that you get assistance from a private lender attorney. That's not just any real estate attorney, okay? Because I think this is really important to clarify. I've seen promissory notes drafted up by real estate attorneys that didn't have an interest rate in there. They didn't have any sort of default provisions. There were a number of different inaccuracies in that promissory note that rendered it potentially unenforceable. So it's really important to sync up with a real estate attorney that does have an active practice in private money lending that can advise you on legal and regulatory constraints if there are any, that can help answer any questions while you're doing your due diligence in the compile and condition phase, and that can help act as your legal advisor every step of the way, even after the loan is funded. So here, the important person involved here is your attorney, as well as a title officer and an escrow closer. They will help you draft up your legal documents, ensure that you get a title policy created, and that it is closed through a third-party escrow closer or an attorney, depending on the state that you're in. And so that it is funded very properly and above board, and that security instrument, whether it's a deed of trust or a mortgage, depending on what state that you're in, they use both, either or. So my state is a deed of trust state and others are mortgage states. And they're essentially the same security instrument, only one uses a trustee and the other does not have a third-party trustee. But it's really important to use an escrow closer, whether that's an attorney or an LPO, to actually take in the capital, get the loan docs signed, notarized, and recorded within that jurisdiction, and then disperse those funds properly. One of the biggest mistakes I see happening over and over with private money lenders, especially new ones, is that they will tender cash directly to the borrower. without using a third-party closer. This is really, really not a good idea. You really need to make sure that you're utilizing third-party services to handle this on your behalf and to make sure that everything is transacted legally and above board. And the last step is collect and convey. This is obviously my favorite one because now that the loan is actually placed into service, now you're just managing your investment. So yes, from time to time, you're going to want to check in on your borrower's project. It really is up to you how often you want to check in. I try not to check in with my borrowers too much because I don't want them to think that I'm hand-holding them along the way or acting, like a babysitter. But I do want to have periodic check-ins to make sure that that project is being handled well. So it could be, I have some private lenders that do it on a monthly basis. I have some that just do sort of a midterm check-in, and then some that really could just sort of leave it to the end. It really depends on your preference and how involved you want to be. But the idea here is that you're just collecting your monthly installment payments. It could be like mailbox money. But you want to make sure that that project is managing itself very effectively and that you're getting your monthly installment payments on time and that you're ensuring that the loan is compliant and that it's still performing. One of the biggest challenges that I see with private lenders here is that they choose to service the loan themselves, meaning they will have the borrower either ACH a payment to them on a monthly basis or mail them a check, depending on what your preference is. But they are trying to manage it all on their own. And the reason I'm not a big fan of this, although many do it, is that I really want to make sure that this is a passive investment for me. So there are a lot of third-party contract servicers out there that will help manage your loan servicing for you. We use one nationwide called Note Servicing Center. They're based in California. They operate just about nationwide. And I pass through those monthly charges and the setup fee through to my borrower. So I'm actually not charged anything out of pocket. But the beauty of it is when I'm using a third-party servicer is that they'll manage the ACH withdrawal from the borrower. They'll hold it to ensure funds are actually deposited and it's not returned for insufficient funds. And then they'll automatically place that through an ACH credit into my account. No longer do I have to wait and sit and see if they've mailed me a check. They manage all of the late notices to the borrower too. So if my payment doesn't come in on the 1st, I don't have to send a notification to my borrower. And then the nice thing at the very end of the loan, when it either comes due or the borrower is completed with their project and asks for a payoff, is that payoff demand, meaning how much you owe or the borrower owes back to you, including principal, interest owed, any sort of fees that are needed as well. That payoff demand is generated by your third-party contract servicer. And then at the end of the year, most contract servicers will also provide 1099 INTs for you and 1098 INTs for the borrower. So I don't even have to manage any tax documents at the end of the year either. It's just a wonderful way to be able to collect those payments, but not really have to handhold it every step of the way until I'm finally paid off. And so that's really my key tip here is use a third-party servicer. When you're first starting out, focus on making sure that you truly understand how to fund the loan, how to find and fund it every step of the way, that all the considerations, all of the legal matters, all of the due diligence is being handled properly, and let this part be managed by a professional. So I know this is a lot, and it could be pretty overwhelming. There's not a whole lot that you can cover simply in just 1 hour. And there's really not a whole lot that I could cover in 300 pages of the Lend2Live book either. If I could do it all over again, I felt like I was just missing a lot about the total process of finding and funding a loan, understanding what I can and can't do. I was missing education and understanding legal parameters and guidelines to work within. I didn't really have any systems set up. I had to really develop those on my own. And essentially, it was kind of building the plane as I was flying it. I was kind of flying blind, so to speak, really early on because I just didn't know what I was doing. And so even though that there's much more that can be covered within 1 hour, I think that it's really important to understand what is available to you. It's really important to have that peer support. I didn't have that earlier on. I didn't have expert advice. So one thing that I wanted to work with over the last 18 months, I guess, was really making sure that I worked to create something that was accessible to other private lenders on their journey. So what I've developed in 18 months of helping support other private lenders on their journey, really working to make sure that we create some content that would really hit the mark for new and aspiring and novice private lenders. We developed a 6-phase 30-plus module course that breaks down the lending process. As you can see here, I've built it into a really great system called the Mighty Networks platform. Has an awesome user interface on mobile as well, so that you can access modules and videos on the go. And then I also created a private lender battle plan. Essentially what all this is in order to really get started, I wanted to be able to have all the tools, all of the resources, all of the checklists in place to help you get started right away. So you can see just a sample few here where we have a quick start guide on what you need to do before you reach out to your first borrower. We have sample term sheets. We have sample pre-qualification process guidelines and a battle plan to start at the very beginning to define your target audience, your target market. Do some market research if you're going to be lending in a new market outside of your home market. We've developed a ton of tools and resources that accompany the Lend2Live Accelerator course for you as well to really help you get started. And what I'm really excited about is I've been developing for the last, 6+ months, some AI-powered support to be able to help not only my team and the students that I've been working with on how to get some additional tech support for your private lending practice. We start off with like a private lender assessment that really helps get the true essence of what you're trying to fund. It gets an understanding of your risk tolerance here, as well as what kind of experience you have, and really pulls it all together so that you have a solid understanding of the type of loans that you'll want to look for that will help you really sleep well at night and feel comfortable after you've placed your capital. We've also developed a Loan Ranger GPT. This is just an AI assistant that it really helps private lenders navigate the critical pre-qualification process and all the documentation as well. So it works as a coach and an assistant to help guide you through and give you some practice for every step within the CPR lending system. And then we also developed an elevator pitch evaluator GPT. So you can hit the start button. It will ask you questions about who you are and help you create a personal value proposition so that you can really articulate yourself well in what you're trying to find in a prospective borrower and in a prospective loan opportunity to fund. And then additionally, we have real world strategies. So there is a online forum within the Mighty Networks platform that allows you to reach out to other private lender peers that are in various stages of the private lender journey and be able to connect there as well. I think it's really important, again, to be able to connect with your peers and a team of experts to be able to ask questions and not just hear how they would do it, but hear how others would as well. So for example, you might hear people that are doing gap funding out there, meaning they're filling in the gap between the earnest money and down payment and rehab costs and what the borrower will get from another lender. I might not do gap funding. If you follow me on social media, you'll probably know that I don't really do that, and it's not something that I promote. But there are plenty other private lenders that do, and they add in different provisions to help make it safe for them. Hearing why I do it or don't do it and hearing how others do means that it's not necessarily a matter of right and wrong. It's just whether or not it's right or wrong for you. And that's what this community will help provide. And then as a founding member bonus, we'll also include 60 days access to the Lend2Live Collective. And this is something that we've been working on for the last, like 6 months or so, to really create a community, a dynamic community where you can go on at any point in time and get the support that you need, no matter where you are in that loan. So if you're just starting out and you have questions about legal parameters or markets to lend in, this community will be for you. If you have questions about a loan that's stopped performing, you can have access to experts and other private lenders to help give you guidance on how to work out that non-performing loan. So there's a number of different options that we're including here in the Lend2Live Collective that will be a bonus to joining the Lend2Live Accelerator program for your on-demand training. So today is the first day to sign up for the Lend2Live Accelerator. I am going to be opening up a special offer from today until Monday. And so we'll give you a founding member rate of $14.97. This will include all of the things that I discussed previously, ensuring that you have the proper education, the tools and templates you need, the guidance, whether that's from peers, experts, or AI to help you along your journey. At $14.95, we'll give you lifetime access to this course material and community. And it will go up on Tuesday to $19.97. So this will be your first chance. You can scan that QR code and be one of the first to get into this program, and making sure that you can learn how to safeguard your capital. Because I think it's really important to make sure that you understand that as a private money lender, return on investment is extremely important, but return of your capital is even more important. And so we're here every step of the way from the Lend2Live team to make sure that you are preserving your capital and ensuring that you're lending it out safely and securely. And so with that, I will open it up with any questions that you might have. So we have about 10 more minutes left. Melody, are there any questions from the group? Or if you want to take yourself, raise your hand or take yourself off mute, be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
I know Donna, Mick, you had a question. Did that get answered? Can
No, yeah, I had a question about the trying to think of the name of it. Look it up real quick. About the one type of loan that can be done, the direct lender private placement. So I was always under the impression that when I do lending partnerships that I have to have some type of funding in the deal. If not, I could be considered brokering or raising capital. So are you saying that I could actually place other people's money and not have my own money in the deal?
You can. There are, again, it's going to vary state by state. So you brought up a couple of important things. One is it considered raising capital? Ergo, it might be deemed a security. And is there a broker requirement or a licensing requirement? And that's going to vary state by state. So for example, in Washington State, yes, we did do private money placement, or what I'd call private money matchmaking, and we essentially acted as the broker of that loan. So we were never named on the promissory note, the deed of trust, or any of the legal documents, but we helped facilitate and provide the concierge service from beginning to end. We found the loan, we helped them fund it, but the lender, our capital investor, was the one that was placed directly on those security instruments. And so in my state, it's not necessarily deemed a security, and I don't also have to be licensed to be a broker either. But that can change state by state, which is why it's so very important to connect with an attorney in the state that you're lending in and understand what is deemed a security and what is not. But many originators out there like myself, like Flynn Family Lending was, did not need a broker license, or they were licensed and could still help facilitate it and not have to be on the loan as a co-lender. Does that help answer your questions, Donna?
Yeah, and so when you do that, do you have some type of document or something that they sign, like, do you get paid on the HUD? How would that work?
Well, it's going to vary again state by state. We did get paid out on the HUD. We had a broker demand that we would provide to the escrow closer. There are some lenders that might put together a broker agreement, which the capital investor, the actual lender of record, would have to sign. Or a servicing agreement is something that some lenders put in place as well. Again, getting guidance from an attorney on that, on what you should put in place, will be very important to get. From me personally, we never required any of our capital investors to sign any sort of contractual agreement with us. I wanted them to continually lend out through us by earning their trust, not by having them sign a contract. And because we didn't service our loans, we had that servicing agreement prepared on behalf of our servicer and the lender themselves. It wasn't something that we were embedded on. And I did love working with the third-party servicer because then they could manage a couple of disbursements, one to us and one to the lender of record. So it's just going to matter and be a difference of state by state.
Great, thanks.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
I had a quick question about just money kind of in the interim. Like if I have $1 million of commitment from other people, normally I'd use it to flip myself, but if I wanted to do some lending, but it takes me a month to, find the right deal and the right borrower, do you just normally take verbal commitments in that time? And then once the deal actually manifests, then we do the physical steps of raising it? Or are you more of a raise it, get it into your business, and then obviously try to find a deal as quick as possible? Obviously the main question is, I don't want to be paying investors interest when I don't have a deal. It doesn't make any sense. That's kind of the limbo of the capital while I wait for a deal is something that is eluding my mind.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So what you're talking about is having other people's capital and being able to lend that out. So not necessarily your own capital, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. For us, when we started out, we were providing a very prescriptive onboarding process for our investors. I wanted to make sure that they were extremely comfortable with the process of lending out their capital and what that might look like. So even though they might commit and have capital right away, I would give them homework. So sample loans that have similar criteria to, if you have previously funded deals, give them samples of those. If you don't have any, give them samples of types of loans that you would fund so they could look at it with addresses, with loan amounts that they can go and research themselves, that give them the borrower profile as well as the use of funds and the exit strategy. My investors really liked being able to look at it and analyze it, and we get on a call and talk about, out of these 3 loan overviews that I gave you, which one would you fund, if any? And then tell me why, so that I get more solid awareness of what it is that will help them, because I wanted to back into whatever they felt most comfortable with, right? If they were willing to take smaller returns, 9 or 10%, but be in a really safe and secure loan in first position at subs, 55% loan to value, I need to hear that up front, right? Some of my older capital partners really wanted to have just slam dunk deals, and they would have a lower rate of return on it. But maybe some of my younger investors really wanted to maximize their rate of return and would do 12, 13%, but go into second lien position or go higher loan to value because they were willing to take that risk and they had experience in real estate. So this whole process helps that you really ferret out what they need. And then as you're going through that process, still finding deals, actively looking for deals to fish to them. But we found that most are really appreciative of the fact that we're really taking our time to find a proper loan that matches what they need, their end game, right? Not just trying to get any deal and fund it as quickly as possible. They can see that we're really taking our time and doing our due diligence to make the right match.
Okay, great. So yeah, a lot of groundwork up front, and then you don't touch their capital until, you have an active deal that they sign off on, and then that process begins. Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Anyone else?
Cheryl has a question in the chat. She asks, what are your thoughts about lending out of your 401k versus your IRA? Any issues that you're aware of using those funds and any loopholes to access those funds?
So for IRAs and 401ks, that's actually how I first got started. So my first personal loan was using, as I mentioned, a legacy 401k employer-sponsored plan when I worked at T-Mobile, and I was able to migrate those funds over into a self-directed IRA. There are a couple different flavors of qualified retirement plans, but there's traditionally 401ks or IRAs. Solo 401ks are self-directed plans. Those are typically ideal for those that are business owners. And then self-directed IRAs are ones that individuals can then migrate over. But it has to be in a self-directed plan, because if you're trying to use, typically when you're trying to use your existing employer's plan, you're prohibited from making investments in anything that's not on their platform. So it would be really important to get into a self-directed IRA or solo. I'm not a huge expert. I know enough to be dangerous in this realm on how to use it. I love doing private lending in these plans because it is all tax deferred, and then I'm not subjected to what would be called UBIT or UDFI. That's taxes on any levered capital in there, as if you were to hold real estate in your retirement plan. So some people do like to hold real estate in their retirement plan, but if they have leverage on it, meaning they have a mortgage, then any percentage of income that you make on that property with that leverage, you'd have to pay taxes on. And so my husband and I do both. I have a small apartment building in our retirement plan, and I have a small loan on it. And every year I have to file a nonprofit tax return, and that tax return typically costs more than my actual taxes due. But with private money lending, you don't have to worry about that at all. Hopefully that answers your question. Are there any other questions? All right, we are just at the top of the hour, so I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining. I hope to see some of you join the Lend2Live Accelerator Program. As I mentioned, giving a discount today. It's going to be on sale for $14.97 until Monday, and then after that, it's bumping up. But I would really love to see some of you in there, and hopefully it will help you in your journey to becoming a profitable private money lender. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey Beth.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Lisa. I'm a sub 2 in Gator and
Yeah.
know Melissa Palmer. I live in California, and I've heard on a Zoom you said you wouldn't lend in California because of the license. But then there's who could I'm here, right? Boots on the ground. So who could I reach out to talk about usury laws and then the commercial, just not getting sticky with the laws in any way? I know that people don't lend here for a lot of restricted reasons. I don't know everything yet, and I'm just starting to learn, but is there any advice or reasons you don't lend, or where I could find kind of more information, like what I call a foreclosure attorney or a title company? Where, yeah, do you have anything to comment on that and guidance?
Sure. There are a couple of private lender law firms that are actually in California. So Gerard LLP, I think you've probably seen me mention them on our Facebook group
Mhm.
quite a bit. They exclusively practice private lender law in all states, but they are extremely intimately familiar with California lender law as well. So you could try them or DOS Law. They're also based in Southern California. And it's a good starting point to have a discovery call with them to understand what you can and cannot do. There is something called a de minimis rule. And that just means, is there a maximum threshold that if you stay under, then you're exempt from certain laws? So there is a de minimis rule in California, I think, as Kevin Kim from Gerard may have told me, I think it's one. Like you could originate one loan a year in California. I don't know what you would have to do to file for exemptions in Washington State. If you're going to do seller financing, for example, you have to file exemptions for not being a licensed mortgage broker. But I'm not sure exactly how you go through that process down there, and those guys can help you with that. But there is some pretty strict usury law down there. It's capped at 10%. There are some challenges with being able to foreclose or even impose default interest in many cases. Their case law is just being set down there this last year or so. So it's definitely something that you want to get in sync with. And those are the couple that I would probably start with at first.
Okay, thank you so much. Is there a state that you like, a handful of states that, like, if you don't have anyone in other states, would you recommend kind of going where you know the people? Like, I can go to meetups here, I'm feeling this, like, what do I do? I'm here, I can work with people here, but then like I'd have to fully trust or fly out to another state and really start out. So it feels like heavy to, like, how do I do it in a different state? What would your advice on that be? Or would you really recommend getting over that fear because of the strict regulations in California?
I think it's kind of personal, and that's why we have a whole section in the Lend2Live Accelerator that helps guide you through a market selection. Even if you're going to lend in your own home market, you need to do some market research, right? What is the median home price? How active, what does average flip costs look like there? So it's not like you can't lend in California. I think it depends on how much money you have, whether or not that can actually go very far in California. So we go through some of those steps in the course to help figure out what is an appropriate market for you. But the other thing is that you go to these meetups, you're kind of in the same shoes as some of those active investors too, right? They may want to stay connected with other active investors, flippers, private money lenders, but they may be investing out of state, right? So you might be able to get the borrower that you need from a local meetup who might also be investing out of state as well. And maybe they have some resources. So I actually did have a former student that was based in Northern California, and she decided that she was going to start lending in Missouri. That was the market that she chose because of the amount of capital that she had, lack of licensure requirements. She felt comfortable in that market and was developing some resources, got connected with a lovely law firm there. And so some of these Midwestern states may be attractive because of their lower price points and a little bit higher interest garnered as well.
Yeah. And okay, I had another question. Well, thank you. I had one more question on that. Would you recommend like actually going and flying out to that state to meet the borrowers in person, like building that personal relationship? And oh, I wanted to say that we wanted to start our own PML business, not just be private lenders. Would you have the same advice in that, or even more strict advice, like cautionary, for California? And
well, more strict. I mean, if you're going to start it as a business, then you definitely would have to go through the hoops of getting licensed there. And I would say run or walk before you run. Learn how to safely navigate and lend your own capital first before you start taking on other people's capital and lending it out. I mean, it's scary enough to lend out your own capital. That's why we want to make sure that you have the support and the education you need to be able to do it and feel confident about it. It's a much different endeavor to be able to take on other people's capital, right? So it's definitely an awesome way to build a business. I clearly love it. Been doing it for a decade. But I would say that it would be better to start with your own and get more acquainted and build your systems there. It's always better to take risks with your own capital than it is with other people that are, really relying and trusting on you. But if you
Yeah.
have the time and can go out into your new market, I would 100% do it. It's really important to make sure that you can get boots on the ground, like you said. If you're going to develop your virtual team, and you're lending out of state, it's really important to get support in market. So again, for my client that went into Missouri, it'd be great to meet with them in person at their law firm, find other real estate brokers that might want to support your endeavor and meet them when you're there. And then you can meet with the borrower also. So you can make it a multi, check off the list type of trip for you so that you can meet the borrower and then also drive the neighborhoods. Things are a little bit different state by state, city by city. In Washington, for example, I mean, neighborhoods are just neighborhoods. Blocks relatively don't change from block to block. But in places like maybe Phoenix, Arizona, or in Missouri, there's some areas where it's not even just block by block. It could be street by street, opposite sides of the street. And it's really important to know and drive it and get a sort of a feel for what that market looks like. And does it change? You're going down certain neighborhoods in Scottsdale, Arizona, and on one side you've got trailers, and on the other block, one block over, you have $1 million homes. So you can't really get that by just doing it virtually. So if you have the means and ability to do so, I would absolutely say yes.
Okay. And thank you for that.
Yeah.
Would you go over advice on like how to talk to the title companies on, and like, if you're just starting out and you want to sound like you know what you're talking about, but you're still new. Do you do kind of hands-on, like personal questions? I mean, I'm asking very personal questions, not really general, like specific questions, I should say. Would that be, I know you said that you guys are available, but I'm just wondering what that would look like for my own personal journey and like
Sure.
learning from you.
For the Lend2Live Accelerator, there's always going to be that forum where you can post your questions there. We'll be monitoring it. Other people will be involved in as well that can provide some feedback. And then with the 60 days as part of the collective when it launches, then yes, there will be some experts and leaders that are well-versed in private lending across the country that can help answer any questions that you might have. So the Lend2Live Collective will have weekly calls that support coaching, that support, new education, hot seat coaching, things like that, deep deal dives, anything that we feel might be necessary to help answer your questions and give you those helping hands just in time when you need it at that moment.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I have a lot to think about, but I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I could
Stay
ask you more
connected
questions,
and
but
reach out if you have any other questions, okay?
sounds good. Thank you, Beth, for taking your extra time. I appreciate it.
No problem at all. Have a good one.